Over the past 2 years, I've made hundreds and hundreds of videos on Palantir. Today I'm sharing with you the best of Palantir Vision, so feel free to skip around. I hope you enjoy. And this video assumes no prior knowledge of Palantir. So Palantir's CEO is Alex Karp. In 2004, along with Peter Thiel, who I'll get to next, Alex Karp co-founded Palantir as CEO. He is the face of the company, leads many investor relation presentations, and is quite dedicated to Palantir's future. And moving on to the more prominent public figure, Peter Thiel, who many more people know of, and he is actually the chairman of Palantir. He was also the co-founder of PayPal and the first outside investor in Facebook, worked alongside Elon Musk in the past, and his involvement with Palantir is nothing but encouraging for Palantir's future. And two other important leadership figures, should you watch any of Palantir's investor videos, are Shyam Sankar, who's the COO and executive vice president, as well as David Glazer, the CFO and treasurer. You can pause and read those descriptions if you wish. So moving on to the operations of the company. Their mission statement is as follows. Our mission is to help our users, the people doing the hard work on complex real-world problems. We do this by writing software that enables effective analysis against complicated data-driven problems. And this is where many people get lost. That is a very abstract mission. I think Palantir is better described by the functions of their platforms, which I will now discuss. So they have three main software platforms: Palantir Gotham, Palantir Foundry, and Palantir Apollo. Gotham is all about anti-terrorism. It's the ultimate government tool, and currently, along with government contracts, represents the majority of Palantir's revenue. Foundry, on the other hand, is the operating system of the modern enterprise. Again, Palantir is so hard to conceptualize as a company because of how open-ended its products and platforms are. They really can do anything. Foundry is a corporate software platform that unlocks enterprise growth and insight. And then there's Apollo, which is deemed to be able to handle everything north of compute and is the software as a service backbone to Gotham and Foundry. Palantir continues to iterate, advance, and introduce more and more utility to their products. So now let's have a look at the financials. This is not a consulting company. However, it relies on contracts, both enterprise and government, for access to its platforms. So moving on to the last bit here, future projections. This is coming directly from Palantir's investor relations page. They're aiming to maintain a strong growth rate with revenue of $4 billion or more in 2025. I personally believe they are way lowballing this, but nevertheless good to see them putting some number out there and at least getting analysts to think of this company more as one that will be a powerhouse in the next few years once their platforms take off. This is one of my favorite quotes. It came from an interview of Alex Karp, I believe on the day of the direct listing in 2020.
We are going to be the most important software company in the world, and people will figure out what that's valued over a long period of time. And we're very comfortable with investors toying around. It could be like this, it could be like that. We are going to deliver the world's best software with the world's most efficient way of delivering it. Investors will decide what's that is worth to them. And I think you'll find in a number of years that there will be a consensus. Palantir is a truly special software company that is arguably the most important software company in the world.
I'm going to flip the script and explain reasons not to buy Palantir stock, then debunk them. With any investment, it is crucial to understand exactly what you are getting into and what risks you face despite the potential rewards. Inversion is looking at things upside down and planning for the opposite of what you want to happen. So you reverse the equation and identify potential sources of failure up front. Invert. Always invert. Turn a situation or problem upside down. Look at it backward. What happens if all our plans go wrong? Where don't we want to go? And how do we get there? Instead of looking for success, make a list of how to fail instead. Tell me where I'm going to die, that is, so I don't get there. We are trying to assess whether or not PLTR can be a 10x company in at least 10 years, with plenty of appreciation to take advantage of in between now and 2030. Right off the bat, losing your entire investment would be the worst case scenario. But if you're investing in stocks, I'm sure you are aware of the inherent risk you are taking. The only loosely financial advice I can give to you is to not invest money that you are not willing to lose. Once you've gotten past that ultimate barrier to entry, we can now move along to inverting Palantir specifically. So we must turn PLTR's investment thesis upside down and look at it backwards. Profitability, it's a fair point. The company is not profitable after 17 years, but I can't help but remember the same focus on Tesla just a few quarters back before they turned the corner on making money. If you fear that investing before profitability is not for you, you can go ahead and search for the best dividend stock videos. My point is that it's fine if you don't want to invest in a company before they've achieved profitability, but once they do, as they outlined in their Investor Day presentation, the stock will no longer be as cheap. I'm just saying that investing before profitability is a high-risk way to achieve a potentially higher reward. PLTR's political involvement sparks controversy. It is just the nature of their business. But inverting the idea of them being at risk for their work is interesting since they are not a consulting business, as many misconstrue them to be. They build the software platforms and let those do the work. But the controversy is definitely something you need to weigh when thinking about whether or not to invest. But when taking it that step further, I think there is little to worry about. I certainly think that politics could pose a problem to this business if they get caught in a political trap and cannot fulfill or obtain contracts that are crucial to its future success. That being said, the two faces of the company, Thiel and Karp, are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and I tend to think that this is a good thing for the business. It stimulates the culture and will likely save Palantir from making politically charged decisions. To invert one final time, PLTR's unique operations make it an intriguing addition to any portfolio as a way to diversify away from traditional tech that is under fire and faces potential upcoming regulation. Palantir's competition is largely misunderstood. There isn't a single name that goes head-to-head with PLTR, since Palantir is in a league of its own, with the products it offers, the value those provide, the CEO it has, and his hair. That said, it is not the only company to leverage vast amounts of data for problem solving on many levels. Palantir serves corporate and clandestine clients as the entity that, quote, enables our customers to transform massive amounts of information into knowledge that reflects their world. Palantir's offering blends artificial intelligence and action with a human operator. Palantir specifically isn't trying to replace human analysts, they're actually augmenting them. Palantir's solutions and operations remain partly human power. In other words, the advantage that Palantir has could also lead to its downfall if AI gets so good that no human operator is necessary and Palantir's system setup is hypothetically rendered obsolete. But there is a gray area between what AI is today and artificial general intelligence if it ever materializes in the future. Palantir knows that AI can detect patterns in data that humans cannot. After all, that's what its software platforms set out to achieve. In fact, PLTR allows for human and software symbiosis. This means that every link in the supply chain, inventory levels, supplier quality, demand forecasting, production planning, transportation management, and more, can all be revolutionized. Palantir's products provide an interim before AGI, but what happens when everything can be done automatically, when the right decisions can be made without question in no time via AI? Upon first glance, Google is not a competitor to Palantir. Since Palantir's business is built on licensing out software platforms, every announcement of an additional client is a tailwind. It may or may not move the stock, depending on what the announcement is exactly, how much the deal goes for, and what it symbolizes for the company. But following this stock means you must be ready to analyze the contracts as they roll in, because the bigger Palantir gets, the more interest it will attract for its products. More on that in a bit with the flywheel illustration I've made. I don't make a video every time a contract gets confirmed, because not only is that a waste of your time and attention, it's also not necessary, as many of these contracts are to be expected. On the corporate side, Palantir's Foundry software allows for the integration and extrapolation of data across an enterprise, and more businesses will realize that Palantir is right for them to help reduce excess spending and be leaner, more efficient organizations. On the government side, as I've I've mentioned recently, Palantir is just at the beginning when it comes to how integral its Gotham product will eventually be to the entire US government. After all, its system and granular security model are uniquely suited for secure collaboration across government divisions. As Palantir's growing sales force connects with both prospective business and government clients, more contracts will be signed, and PLTR's client base will subsequently expand. Palantir has put in the work in developing its platform solutions, and I believe as PLTR continues to scale, it will become clear that each incremental contract will get the company closer and closer to profitability as its relative operating and onboarding costs decrease with that scale. The flywheel. When you build the best product in a given category, the customers will find you. I believe that Palantir has that superiority. They are one of a kind in what they offer, and a good amount of the time, what they offer isn't just desirable, it's necessary to complete a task quickly. But we also know that, given its line of business, it is also useful to have a dedicated sales force to stimulate sales. There are 3 stages to this flywheel that I've made for PLTR. They correspond to the acquire, expand, and scale phases. That's on purpose, but there's a little more to it. I'll break it down. The first part is what I call attract. This is where Palantir may have actually made the first move and reached out to an organization with its sales force to offer a free demonstration of the platform's services. Or perhaps a business was already aware of Palantir and realized that in order to be competitive, it needs to use Palantir's cost evaluating software or any one of the many modules that Palantir can set up. In this first stage, much like the acquire phase, Palantir is enticing the client and keeping the costs low before making them commit to anything. The second part of the flywheel is what I call engage. At this point, Palantir has already gotten the customer and is setting up the software with certain modules and tailoring it and customizing it as best as possible. Now, a multi-year contract can be signed once everything is operational and proved to be a viable and functional setup. And the last part of the flywheel is what I've chosen to call deliver. This is about Palantir delivering and their clients using Palantir's software to deliver themselves. So finally, Palantir is able to deliver on its bold promises of how great and successful its services are and what they can accomplish for a given organization. But this wouldn't be a flywheel if it stopped here. So the loop closes as that public success creates a virtuous cycle. And even before these 2 announcements, with IBM and AWS, Palantir reversed its previous strategy of non-Salesforce and started building a Salesforce last fall. Ultimately, the plan here, as I see it, is to use these big, established companies to push their software and drive growth and sales for Palantir's own fully fledged products. With an increasing sales team, a partnership with IBM to leverage an even larger sales force, and this newest development with AWS, Palantir is making strides in client education, since very few know the exact power of PLTR's platforms. Thus, this gives Palantir more flexibility in making investments back to push more customers into the acquire phase, and to invest more back into the expand phase cycle that should, as years go by, and yes, this won't be quick, but should turn the company overall profitable. The basics. Foundry is essentially a data warehouse to help companies collect and analyze information. Access to this platform includes a graphical data interface and statistical analysis made possible by AI machine learning networks. Foundry, as opposed to Palantir Gotham, is more focused towards the private sector, a huge yet demanding opportunity for PLTR.
A central operating system.
I'm going to run through Palantir's description of this integral part of their business on their website. Palantir Foundry is a platform that reimagines how people use data by removing the barriers between back-end data management and front-end data analysis. Foundry enables users with a varying technical ability and deep subject matter expertise to work meaningfully with data. With Foundry, anyone can source, connect, and transform data into any shape they desire, then use it to take action. Now, I know that sounds super abstract, but let's dig deeper into what is really going on here. Under the hood, Palantir Foundry is backed by data integration and business logic in tandem. versioning semantics to keep logic in sync, security to replace unreliable one-off policies, code analyses and reports to enable safe experimentation, architecture to keep individual components in sync, formats to interoperate an organization's entire data ecosystem, flexible frameworks to keep evolving regulations and best practices. So that was the back end. Here is the front end for the people actually doing work for the businesses. Palantir Foundry's front end capabilities let every user tap into the power of their organization's data, a foundation to drive collaboration, discovery, and serendipity, an ontology to turn data landscape into a representation of the entire organization, data sets and analyses that allow users to build on one another's work, data lineage that lets users jump from insights and logic that feed them, analytical tooling to supercharge and accelerate advanced analytical initiatives. Assuming your head is spinning by now, let's take a step back. And it's not crucial that you understand every single word I'm saying, but the main idea here and the purpose for you watching this video is for you to be able to understand the whole essence of Palantir Foundry and how it all comes together, what it means for businesses, what it means for employees, and how this platform is so unique in its capabilities. Powering data transformation. Foundry's capabilities comprise the 4 core pillars of a flexible and enduring transformation. Data security. Protect data confidently with automatic propagation from source system to final insight. Understand how an insight came to be with lineage and versioning of both data and code. Protect production without disconnecting it from the sandbox environment. So we got a big focus on data security here, thinking from the ground up on how to build the safest, most secure system, and in this case, platform for Foundry. Business ontology. Unify the organization by capturing every business concept in a common ontology. Compound business intelligence by feeding insights back into the ontology. Improve the quality of ontology data. So it's all about building upon what you already have. Analytical diversity. Empower business analysts with point-and-click environments that unlock complex analytics. Supercharge advanced analytics for data engineers and data scientists. Accelerate machine learning and artificial intelligence with quality data and seamless deployment to production. So within a subset, you need to make sure you have analytical diversity. You need to make sure the data you have is diverse enough to be feeding the algorithm in the right way. Openness and extensibility. Enhance the value of existing IT investments by centralizing data operations. Plug into in-house and third-party solutions through open data formats and open APIs. Accelerate future projects and reduce their cost with reusable data pipelines and centralized management. So that's just bringing it all together in a safe way and really opening up to opportunities that were not possible before in those specific contexts. The real-world applications. So what are organizations doing with Palantir Foundry? A successful data transformation requires the whole organization to operate in lockstep. With Foundry, the enterprise comes together to transform the organization and turn data into a competitive advantage. Something very key about Foundry that you will not find in the same way elsewhere. Using Palantir Foundry for your business creates a competitive advantage with how you are able to diagnose and extrapolate from what you are able to learn on the back end and have your employees put in on the front end for your business. They list examples here. Deliver immediate compounding business value, unite the organization around a common ontology, manage data and business logic in tandem, secure the data once, secure the system in perpetuity, instill trust in data with continuous improvement, and make operations analytical and analytics operational. So I didn't want to read off every single paragraph there, but instead I want to give a more visual representation from this separate PDF that I found from Palantir's website. Foundry in action. From research and development to clinical trials to production and distribution, the pharmaceutical industry generates massive amounts of data. The company that harnesses this data can make better informed decisions to bring new products to market faster and more safely. When Airbus set out to accelerate its aircraft production timeline, we teamed up to improve its manufacturing efficiency while ensuring the delivery of safe and high-quality aircraft. The aircraft manufacturing process generates a massive amount of data. Airbus knew there were valuable insights to be gained if it could make sense of the data scale and diversity. In a world where sitting in front of the TV is no longer the only way we consume media, it's hard to put the right ads and marketing in front of the right audiences. We're helping a major US broadcast network reinvent how they use data to drive revenue and target audiences. For vehicle manufacturers, quality deficiencies are an existential threat to reputation and profits. We work with one of the world's largest automakers to improve quality and reliability to reduce warranty claims and recalls. A major payment processor handles billions of credit card transactions per year. When we met, they saw a lot of potential for this data in their high turnover industry, where merchant customers have little incentive to pick one provider over another. Need I say any more? Those are all great examples. If you weren't sure how Foundry was being used in the real world, how it was being put into action, those are all great examples to look back on. This is a real competitive advantage for those businesses. They use Foundry and they are getting real value from it. And what does that mean? They are relying on Palantir to continue to support that platform so they can use it. They are paying Palantir for the right to be able to use Foundry, and that's where these giant contracts come from. But if Palantir really is going to 10x, they need their Foundry platform to just take off. And that means they need small and medium businesses using it as well. And that's something I've said in the past, and that's something I'll keep saying in the future. Foundry needs to go mainstream for this company to dominate. No, it is not the only thing that will determine their success, but Foundry taking over would certainly be a step in the right direction. The platform. Nearly everything sounds great in practice, so I'll thumb through some screen images as a way to illustrate the real-life Palantir interface. This is what the secret sauce of PLTR looks like. In my opinion, it's a good aesthetic with a focus on productivity and solving the problems that need to be solved. The fog of war is the fact that war is inherently volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and it's unclear exactly what is happening, what needs to happen, and how to act to ensure that it does. Addressing Russia's invasion of Ukraine, CEO Alex Karp said, quote, "Our software is in the fight around the world. We need an allied technology infrastructure in Europe to step up and fight this battle alongside us in order to win." This, of course, in reference to Palantir's decision to work solely with the West and its allies, foregoing other revenues to take a stand. This was not a recent decision to do so, not in the last few weeks, not in the last few months, not in the last few years. This is from inception of the company. Gotham is one of Palantir's 3 bat signals. Gotham being Palantir's platform for decision-making in global defense while maintaining privacy and access controls. It is an AI-enabled data solution designed to integrate, manage, secure, and analyze real-time data that enables users to make more informed decisions. Gotham can be used to integrate structured and unstructured data that is typically stored in disconnected systems. As it flows into the platform, the data is enriched and mapped into defined objects and relationships to service critical insights. Gotham is structured around objects and links between them. Its underlying model is fundamentally a graph and describes and explores properties of relationships between objects that represent, for instance, real-world people, places, and things. Gotham supports top-down and bottom-up analysis by integrating data from any number of systems and presenting it in multiple visual forms, enabling analysts or humans, independent of the computer itself, to produce actionable insights and intelligence based on the full ecosystem of available data. Ultimately, the platform helps organizations combine, protect, and analyze large chunks of data, and Gotham operates as an organization's knowledge base so that users can start analyzing data from multiple sources, implement it, as I said, into a human-centric model, and bring it to life for human-driven analysis, and do so fast with rapid time to value. Palantir's main clients are big organizations, including the US government and other liberal democracies on the governmental side. For those of us that care about the long term of this company and the intricacies of PLTR's platforms, it's called Palantir Foundry Impact Studies, and everything I'm about to show you is just that. How Palantir's Foundry makes an impact across all the industries to which it is applied. Palantir Foundry, one platform, global impact. You'll see that Palantir highlights 5 different segments on the website. Those are manufacturing, healthcare, finance, logistics, and media. I'll be breaking all of those down and looking at the write-ups for each. So for manufacturing, Palantir says, Foundry connects local decisions with global ones, from the factory floor to the C-suite. For the first time, these organizations have an integrated feedback loop to rethink product development, proactively address quality issues, and optimize production. So moving on to the first impact study, and yes, they do have full write-ups for each of these. This one is manufacturing quality, about improving vehicle quality and ratings. They say thousands of automotive plant engineers detect trending defects at their station while vehicles are still on the assembly line, minimizing cost issues later on, and key vehicle models have since made a jump in quality score rankings. I'll link all of these impact studies in the description, but for each one that I'm showing in this video, I do want to read the impact specifically that Palantir highlights in their PDFs, because in this video I'm trying to get the essence of what Foundry is able to do for these organizations. So for this first study about manufacturing quality and improving vehicle ratings, there are 3 bullets. Issue diagnosis and quality reporting take minutes instead of hours, and issues are resolved 80% faster, and the ability to identify emerging issues and address them proactively has improved quality, reliability, and customer ratings. And finally, the entire organization, from assembly plants to quality teams to executives, operates on a common set of KPIs. And the second impact study for manufacturing is production planning and optimizing production globally. A global manufacturer uses Foundry to plan production across hundreds of plants. The newfound ability to run large numbers of optimization scenarios, more efficiently allot production, and have identified ways to save tens of millions of dollars. So the impact here is production allocation decisions that used to take months now take a few days. And by running 100% of all possible production optimization scenarios, the manufacturer has identified tens of millions of dollars in potential savings. And for the last study of manufacturing that Palantir shows off on this website, we get vehicle recalls, scoping recalls with a leap in speed and precision. By automatically mapping parts to vehicles, Foundry allows a major automaker to identify all vehicles potentially affected by a recall in minutes. And thanks to more accurate scoping, costly recall amendments are down significantly. So the takeaways here are that complex recalls can be scoped in minutes with significantly higher accuracy, and recalls of this scale used to take years to generate. And finally, the automaker in question, the one that has proved the efficacy of Palantir's platform here, reduced costly recall amendments by 80%. So there you have it. That was one of 5. That was manufacturing. I'm going to run through the next 4. Healthcare institutions use Palantir Foundry to accelerate the rate of scientific discovery with real-time access to experimental findings. They are performing novel statistical analyses, developing breakthrough insights into diseases, and collaborating in new ways across the scientific community. The first study is precision medicine, turbocharging research at the NIH. NIH high-throughput screening robots have tested hundreds of millions of combinations of cell lines and compounds. Researchers use Foundry to access and analyze this massive scale data, uncovering potential repurposing opportunities, synergistic drug combinations, and genomic correlates of drug response. The takeaways here is that NIH researchers have uncovered insights in hours that used to require months of data gathering and manipulation. And one lab predicted novel drug combinations for use in an oncology setting, which were then experimentally validated in vitro. And this could end up leading to a clinical trial. A different lab validated a gene signature for drug response found in internal experiments. This has led to increased confidence in the initial finding and precise experimental follow-ups. The second second impact under healthcare is patient cohort creation, unifying patient data to personalize medicine. Cancer centers use Foundry to overcome a siloed data landscape with a unified and compliant view of patients that fully respect patient privacy. Scientists create granular patient cohorts to deliver individualized therapy. So the impacts here are that researchers can now identify patient cohorts in 30 minutes versus weeks, and ongoing work is reducing the time it takes to collect data for a study from months to a few days. So let me just stop at this point and say, the real theme here is time saved. We will continue to see this on the rest of the impacts for the other industries, but it's about how Palantir's Foundry saves your organization time by performing operations faster, which can reduce costs and accelerate nearly every part of a business. Time is one of the most valuable assets, and Palantir is helping to unlock it. Just think about that as we continue. And for the third impact study here, we have field force optimization, empowering smart adaptive sales. A pharma company integrates tens of data sources to gain valuable statistical insights into the market. Managers pinpoint new revenue opportunities, and sales representatives feed their learnings back into Foundry to continuously improve sales strategies. The takeaways here being that the entire organization, from leadership to field representatives, has visibility into an ever-changing market landscape, and the sales organization has surfaced hundreds of new opportunities to gain market share. So that was healthcare for you, a very interesting and expansive vertical for Palantir to really expand in throughout this decade. Moving on to finance. Major financial institutions use Palantir Foundry to centralize and accelerate their operations in compliance with rapidly changing regulatory terrain with a unified and securely managed view of their clients. Banks are unlocking their ability to collaborate across functions, from client onboarding to marketing. So we start off with accelerating compliance with a single client view. A global bank automatically resolved 4 billion customer records spread across jurisdictions, and accessing customer information necessary for compliance is now 90% faster. And the other takeaway here is that investigation reviews are 80% faster, and the bank reviews 20% more information at 95% lower cost. These are just mind-blowing figures. New account screening, growing the business while minimizing risk. A retail bank could only investigate 30% of new account applications flagged for money laundering risk and automatically rejected the others. With Foundry, the team now investigates 100% of flagged accounts. The takeaways here being that analysts can now review 30 applications a day, up from previously 5, and the bank now screens 100% of applications, which is up 30%. Total false positive flags have decreased by 50%. Some huge improvements in operational efficiency. Now moving on to anti-money laundering, powering multi-factor transaction monitoring and multi-factor alerting models developed in Foundry allow a global bank to address evolving threats and reduce false positive alerts. Alert triage is now 45 times more precise, and analysts resolve alerts 60% faster. So the two takeaways being money laundering alert disposition has become 45 times more productive, and we just saw that alerts are resolved 60% faster, which is 90% lower cost. So for logistics, global organizations use Palantir Foundry to create fully operational digital twins of their entire value chain with real-time insight into complex supply chains and global workforces. These organizations are optimizing global logistics and bolstering customer satisfaction. Global supply chain, scaling a supply chain to help fight hunger. The World Food Program uses Foundry to adapt to changing conditions on the ground and safely deliver 12.6 billion rations each year to beneficiaries across 80 countries. In just 3 months, the World Food Program had fully operational pipelines for the global supply chain, and the organization optimizes food baskets on a daily basis for all countries. In the past, food optimization took 3 to 4 months. Deployment in 6 pilot countries yielded an estimated $30 million in savings, with projected savings of $100 million at scale. This can provide aid of tens of millions of additional people. Really puts things in perspective. Now for some CRM task prioritization, transforming the operations of a global workforce. A shipping company aggregates, prioritizes, and efficiently allocates tasks in Foundry to 2,000 customer service agents across more than 100 countries. Streamlined task completion saves saves the company tens of millions of dollars. So key tasks are scored by impact and prioritized in seconds versus hundreds of hours, and tasks automatically assigned to thousands of agents across more than 100 countries. And again, these efficiencies have saved the company tens of millions of dollars. Now for customer inquiries resolution, improving high-stakes customer service. A global logistics company effectively resolves thousands of invoice-related inquiries daily while improving customer confidence. Total inquiries have decreased by 10% and collections are up $50 million. Those are basically the takeaways for this impact study. But logistics, again, you're seeing a lot of these big figures showing the strength of Foundry. Raw data comes in, solutions come out, and money gets saved along the way. It's as simple as that. And now for the final one, media. Traditional media organizations use Palantir Foundry to stay ahead of disruptive changes to their industry with new insight into their operations. These organizations are transforming advertising sales, retaining and acquiring new subscribers, and successfully growing digital lines of business. So now we'll be talking about subscriber engagement and acquiring and retaining OTT customers. A broadcasting network intelligently allocates marketing budgets and prevents churn on its OTT platform. New targeted campaigns now launch in hours, not months. In one key campaign, the target group engagement increased by 300%. The network launched 5 times more campaigns over the same period, and decisions on how to allocate marketing budgets are now fully data-driven, maximizing revenue and return on investment. And now for audience segmentation and enabling precision targeting for broadcast ad sales. Using integrated viewership and audience behavior data, a TV ad sales organization builds custom targets out of 80,000 possible raw audience segments. The sales team now integrates on tailor-made pitches in minutes, empowering them to deliver 8 times more data-rich pitches. The takeaways here being that ad sales generates incremental revenue from existing clients, and the team iterates on data-rich, tailor-made pitches in minutes. And precision audience targeting allows the network to sell undervalued inventory at a premium rate. And finally, for ad sales transformation, realigning ad sales around data-driven KPIs. A traditional ad sales organization improves data quality by aligning operational incentives with strategy. Automatic prioritization of more than 1,000 advertisers lets the sales team focus on the highest potential accounts, maximizing revenue for the network's linear inventory. Ad sales transformed from a qualitative relationship-driven business into a data-driven organization fueled by strategic KPIs. The entire organization has a 24/7 view of advertisers' account portfolios and the overall business. And finally, the network shifted specific advertisers' spend to digital while generating incremental revenue by retaining traditional TV inventory for new advertisers. So there you have it. That was manufacturing, healthcare, finance, logistics, and media. 3 impact studies for each one, and I read you the specific impact, the individual numbers, the optimizations, and the qualitative benefits of each organization onboarding Foundry. Valuation overview. I'll get right into it. Palantir, at its core, is a company specializing in big data analytics and interpretation. Their 3 aforementioned platforms. Palantir Foundry alone has an estimated total addressable market in excess of $50 billion. Then we have Palantir Gotham, and this governmentally focused platform has an estimated total addressable market of higher than $60 billion, so even more than Foundry. And finally, Apollo, a continuous delivery system that manages and deploys both Gotham and Foundry by orchestrating configuration updates. Apollo's success has allowed Palantir to improve margins enough to avoid adapting a consultancy model, which is what many still falsely perceive them to be. Palantir has itself referenced Apollo as a software as a service first platform and as the company's competitive edge. With its 3 main platforms and services, PLTR wants to create software products 5 years before the world knows they need them. Target market. Palantir's target clients are state and government organizations, as well as large corporations. They define their target market as the 6,000 companies with more than $500 million in total revenue, which comes out to a summation of $110 billion in total addressable market. Having such an existing customer base is advantageous because of how it comprises those who have money to spend on Palantir's services. However, as I've mentioned before in other videos, if the government or any other client business cuts ties with PLTR, that effect could cascade through their financials. Recall Palantir's three-stage master plan with the acquire, expand, and scale phases. In the first two phases, customers go through a pilot, acquire, and if the pilot proves successful, they move to a second phase, expand. In both phases, as Palantir proves the project's technical feasibility and customizes it to expand across the whole organization, it runs those projects at a loss with a negative contribution margin. However, as the company and account move to the scale phase, its contribution margins become positive and improve over time as the contract and relationship become meaningful. Since this is a flywheel, introducing clients to Palantir's software is crucial, and that's the power of a Salesforce. So it's pretty obvious that since Palantir is starting at the top end, big businesses, Fortune 500 companies, and not medium to smaller size businesses that could unlock Palantir's TAM are not currently being served. If Palantir was to unveil in the future, again 5 to 10 to 15 years out, an additional product to move down market, Foundry Lite, something else, a lighter, less powerful, less advanced, but more mobile, more agile product that any startup in the world could use to analyze, keep track of, and empower their operations, that would more than double their effective TAM. I think Palantir is a much longer play if you want that smaller to medium sized business additional total addressable market. And I know some people are definitely not willing to hold on to a stock for 20 years. That's very difficult to do. But I think that is how long it could take, probably a little less than that, for this more medium to small size business to play out. I think that in the next 5 years, Palantir will expand its reach, maybe up to its first 1,000 customers. For context, they're currently around 125 in varying spaces and industries. More users would allow it to continue to innovate on its platform development and how it applies AI for operations. So talking about the end game for Palantir, what's its competitive moat? Well, I believe it has a human capital advantage, as Palantir only hires top talent for its forward deployed engineers and just regular software engineers, pulling from elite institutions around the world. And it's worth pointing out that when Palantir has government contracts this deep, handling top secret information, these types of deals are difficult to discontinue. Conversely, Palantir's competitors are found in lower DoD impact levels and have less influence with the government. Palantir has spent over 15 years working with the US government and allied agencies, which has led to the buildup of trust and government-grade security, giving stability to its contracts. Palantir adds decades of experience over a variety of industries and creates a ton of value. And finally, Palantir has chosen to aid the US and allied government agencies, which has allowed for a stronger customer base internationally and subsequently greater contracts, since Palantir has put the American flag in the ground. But this company and the stock are not without risks. When I hopped on the call, Sham explained that they were doing post Q2 earnings report callbacks, and they just got off the phone and were done speaking with Morgan Stanley and Citibank and others, and that actually David Glazer and Kevin Kawasaki were also on the call. So immediately I thanked them very much for the opportunity and said how humbled I was. Does Palantir use Palantir like using Foundry internally? Sham responded by something along the lines of, "You bet. We have both Gotham and Foundry, and by extension Apollo running internally. We do our finances and operational planning with Foundry, and Foundry is a core part of actually delivering the continuous delivery of the software." And he even went on to say that Foundry helps run other foundries, mentioning that it's a bit meta in that regard. And then he said, "As you can expect, we're using it for everything." So I thought that was an amazing response. Now, of course, we would expect they're using it internally, at least at some capacity, but he made it clear that this is not just for beta testing or testing the software. They are actually using it to scale their business. They're using it for finances. That is so bullish. They use it for operational planning, and of course for the continuous delivery of their software, and for running other foundries. That is very interesting. And what I also loved about it is they're using Gotham internally. Now, traditionally, Foundry is the commercial product, but we have seen sometimes Gotham be used in a more commercial setting, and apparently Palantir is using it internally as well. They use all three of their main products, Foundry, Gotham, and Apollo. And what does that mean? mean? Well, that means that they are the ones designing their products for a scaling business. They're the ones that are saying, this is what we need, this is what we need to develop, and this is how we need the software to behave when we ask it of something. And that is just such a great asset to have. When you use your own product, you see its flaws, you see its strengths, and you can rapidly iterate to enhance it. So that makes me even more confident in Palantir's ability to deliver software that is meaningful and that can truly help businesses do what they would otherwise not be able to do. Next up, I asked about adopting Bitcoin. I said on the Q1 call, we saw that Palantir indicated interest in potentially adopting Bitcoin in some capacity. I asked if they could speak to any updated commentary on that, and to take it a step further, if they could indicate any interest in using blockchain technology or the like in the financial space. Since there are just so many verticals, DeFi, smart contracts, insurance, it's obviously going to be such a huge market going forward. So I asked if they had any thoughts right now that they could share in that space. So David Glazer, CFO, chimed in. He said that they agree that it's definitely going to be a massive market going forward, and they're looking to see how Bitcoin can fit into the treasury strategy, or anywhere else really, because he's the one overseeing all of that. And he talked about more on a high level how they run the business and the company, and how he really has to think about defending against potential black swan events. And he said, and I'm very excited to share this because I was not aware of this, I haven't seen anyone else mention it. Now this is something you could have found out on your own, but David Glazer said if you look in the 10Q, you can actually see that we purchased a small amount of gold. He said we're seeing Palantir start to prepare for those things, just adopting alternative treasuries and such, as well as looking at other alternatives. So I thought that was very fascinating. It seems Palantir is very much forward-looking, but they want to take a more conservative approach to adopting alternative assets. And buying some gold, as you'll see, is actually, in my opinion, not such a bad idea as a first place to start. And if we do look at that 10Q, investment in gold, page 22, during August 2021, the company purchased about $51 million in 100-ounce gold bars. Such purchase will initially be kept in secure third-party facility located in the northeastern US, and the company is able to take possession of the gold bars stored at the facility at any time within reasonable notice. Definitely interesting to see that, and it was great to hear David Glazer's thoughts on, and really interest in, getting Bitcoin to fit in, or other digital currencies to fit into the treasury strategy, and it really does sound like they're going to use it in the future. But then Sham also jumped in, and he spoke to my product question. He said they're having conversations in their pipeline with DeFi companies, blockchain companies, on more traditional use cases for big exchanges, for AML and KYC, compliance advantages, but also more non-traditional use cases even, where they're even more deeply integrating blockchain technology in what they're delivering to customers, especially customers operating across distributed value chains. So it was amazing to get Sham's thoughts on the product side of things. It's clear that they would not simply adopt Bitcoin, let's say, on the balance sheet, and I know this is a hot topic, but it appears they would want to take it that step further, as I asked in my question. And this really is great to get an answer on. It doesn't seem like anything's happening immediately, but they have access to all of these companies in their pipeline that they can leverage partnerships with. They can say, how do you want our product to develop in the future? How can we benefit you with that? So that then they can multiply that advantage, multiply the feature set, and sell it to others. There really is just so much to expand on here. So I'll definitely be talking more about that in the future, but I do have one more question that I asked that I will be sharing today. And this is something that you guys have asked me before. Since Palantir is such a data aggregator, what are the legal implications of being in charge of so much data? We know that Palantir is very focused on privacy and civil liberties, but when Palantir has access to so much data and all of the webs of data coming together, where they could potentially reach conclusions about macroeconomic global activities or have enough insight to buy companies, invest in equities, predict wars or pandemics at the highest level, is Palantir able to leverage that? Or is it so privacy focused that it has to throttle back a bit, limit the artificial intelligence, if you will? So Sham responded, and he said, of course, they are very privacy focused. Ever since the founding of the company, he said it's not just about how we prevent terrorism, it's how we prevent the reaction to terrorists. I believe that's what he said. He said there's a deprivation of civil liberties and privacy as a result of and consequence of attacks when they are successful. And so that philosophy and culture really embodies everything they do. He brought up it. I said, when and how frequently are you expecting to have double-click events? And can you touch on how much more of the Alex Karp interview series we can expect? Because we saw that start up a little bit, and there were a couple of those. And then I asked if there are any plans for the executives to continue to be publicly accessible as they have been previously. Especially Sham has been prominent in the financial media. So Sham responded by saying that they really really do enjoy doing the double-click events, and that he noted that Alex Karp certainly has a lot to say, touching on the piece on my question about if Alex Karp's interview series will continue. So he said more of that should be coming. He wanted to make it clear that there's certainly a lot of planning that goes into things like double-click. And so the answer I was looking for was what he said next, by saying that double-click is maybe something that will happen 2 or 3 times a year. Touching on the earnings call, he said they showcased a bit more of the cutting-edge product, especially with visual media. He said even if it's a small snippet like the 2-minute video around the Meta constellation. And then he said Alex will obviously always continue to have a venue to just speak directly. He's put out some videos in the past. They'll do that as well. He said Palantir doesn't have to wait for the periodicity of earnings. He said that's a long way of saying the short answer is yes, we want to do a lot more of that. So I thought that was a great response and something I'm very happy with. They'll continue to do double-click events. Originally, I thought that would be more of a quarterly thing, but they said they don't want to tie it to quarterly releases, which I think is just fine. If every year they have 2 or 3 events around what industries they want to attack. Originally, we had the first demo day event, which highlighted Foundry, Gotham, and Apollo, but the thing was, there's just way too much that Foundry can do. It was way too hard for them to show all of the use cases of Foundry, so we realized it's probably a better idea to double-click into the power of Foundry with many more events focused on the specific industries that Palantir Foundry can actually be useful for. So we had our first double-click event earlier this year, and while it doesn't sound like they're ready to say when the next one will come, I would have to believe that, given his response here, there will be another one before the end of the year. So good to hear a bit of a time frame for that, and these should be a recurring thing. Alex Karp's interview series will continue to happen. That's something I'm very excited for. We love to hear him talking, and they're continuing to do visual media in the earnings reports, and they've done a lot of good videos and PR recently in the past few months, so it sounds like that is going to continue as well. So I'm very excited about that. Next up, I said we kind of get some of these hints and rumors here and there that a company may be in the process of adopting Foundry and going through the process of piloting Palantir Foundry and making sure that it is right for them. So I said, I know you can't talk about the specifics and you'd have to keep it in a general sense, but can you speak to the motivation for a company, as you said previously, to want to keep their use of Foundry private information and not disclose that and be an anonymous user while being customers of Foundry? Then I also said, how frequently are you seeing it, and is it something that investors should really be aware of? So I was very excited to get the opportunity to ask this question. Sham said it varies quite a bit. Some people are kind of loud and proud about it. Others have a different strategy with what they're willing to or not to disclose. He said he thinks for very different reasons. Sometimes it's about managing their own relationships with vendors, or even at some points their own internal politics. And then he said on the flip side, we are seeing from our perspective a huge number of companies that are much more interested in being public about our relationship and see that as a strategy for them to have that public association. So I really loved this answer, and it does sound like there's a mix of both. There are some that want to keep it private, but also those that are willing to kind of come out and have a press release, say that they're very proud to be partnered with Palantir. So the reasons he stated, again, being managing relationships with vendors and internal politics. So it does sound like those are external reasons for wanting to keep use of Foundry anonymous. I don't think this is anything that Palantir can really control, and all they can do is support the choice of their clients to either make a public announcement or keep it private, because it doesn't matter to them either way. They are still winning the contract and in a partnership. So let me know what your thoughts are on this idea of anonymous using of Foundry. How do you feel as a shareholder that we don't know some of the clients that are actually using Foundry? So I asked, what's the level of expertise in general required for these day zero companies, or even any startup that you've talked about using down at this lower level of a business? Can you speak to what sort of expertise is needed for that, and if FDEs, forward deployed engineers, are involved? I know you're kind of just starting on this and piloting with some alumni companies, but I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on that. Sham said it's a great question, and continued by saying the idea for Foundry for Builders is that it would require 0 engineers. Customers are able to get up and running in minutes. They're able to use this on their own, even while building their core offerings. And he said it's really targeted at businesses whose alternative would be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar custom build sort of project. When you're in that sort of crucial phase in the startup, time to value is everything. So if you have this propelled alignment of, if I build on top of Foundry, I can get there 2 years or so faster and save a lot of capital. I can test and learn that much quicker. This makes a lot of sense and certainly requires no additional technical skills other than any existing ones. Sham said we're very excited to continue to develop the program and get this out into a broader audience beyond just our alumni community, and we're seeing a lot of interest in it. There's been a fair amount of inbound where people are interested in doing this, and validates the idea that you have these companies with ambition, and a big part of it for us is about ambition. And then he went on to reiterate this statement from the earnings call, saying that Palantir's business is limited only by the ambition of our customers, and a lot of its R&D comes out of that inspiration in the field. It's the meta constellation, it's working on the US government's hardest problems, and there's also an analog to that and the commercial. When Palantir wants to go fast, the customers will enable that to happen. He said finding the right partners where they are, just tackling wildly ambitious problems. Since they really want to transform their industries, that's great for Palantir, and it's great for them to partner and build upon what Palantir has been working on for 15 years. So I really loved that answer. With Foundry for builders, there really are just so many network effects going on. I think the SPAC investments in the day zero companies and getting down to these startups is going to yield something huge in the future. But in case you weren't aware, I just want to define what a forward deployed engineer is. So here we are on Quora. This is someone that worked at Palantir previously. They said a forward deployed engineer is someone who works with our customers and helps with the technical aspects of a Palantir product within their organization. We like to say that 90% of Palantir is ready to go out of the box, and the other 10% is custom for each deployment. FDEs are responsible for that remaining portion, and they integrate different data sources into the Palantir platform, create custom code which will help streamline the user experience, advise the customers on the specifics of a deployment so that they can buy what is right for them, and develop the dynamic ontology. But then this person says forward deployed engineers are mainly concerned with the second point here, which is creating custom code. But we now know that Foundry for builders, the product for startups, does not require any engineering beyond Palantir's development of it. They don't need to send a forward deployed engineer to the startup, to the site, to customize any of the code. And that is extremely bullish, not just for scale, but for how confident the company is in its product, saying that it doesn't need any technical customization beyond the point at which a user in the startup, this day zero company, can go in and make the changes themselves in a low code, no code environment, I assume. So I think that is a very strong indication that Foundry for builders might very well be the next leg up for Palantir's growth story. If the piloting goes well with these alumni companies and they're able to keep trialing it out with some other companies before unlocking it to everyone, I think we will have to follow this, see how it develops over the next couple months, and obviously quarters, and see how long it takes. But the fact that there's no forward deployed engineer is really a good sign, so I'm happy to share that news. And finally, likely the question you've all been waiting for, I complimented the management team on how successful Foundry and Gotham have been as products. And I also said I know that both of them have so much farther to go over the next few years. But then I asked if it's too soon to talk about, think about, or speak on a consumer product or a lower level product of any kind. And this is something going off of what Tom Nash and I spoke on our interview. He said the way he sees it playing out is B2B, which we are now, B to smaller b, which is probably Foundry for builders or maybe even something else in the future, and then B to C as the ultimate progression of the evolution of Palantir. So I asked, is that too much to read into it? Could you maybe talk about the TAM expansion? Because that wasn't something mentioned in the S1, and I know that was a fairly recently revealed document, so I'm just wondering about that. And here's Sham once again. He said, I think we're on that journey. If you really think about Foundry for builders, we're expanding the perimeter of Foundry to enable us to go work with medium-sized and small, and we're continuing to invest in that. And if you think about another dimension to this, and it's in terms of the ecosystems, so something like Skywise and the Airbus ecosystem with 140 airlines. Sure, some of those airlines are big, like United, but actually a lot of them are pretty small, and he mentioned one which is called Peach Airlines in Japan, and he said he believes they have 5 aircrafts. So he says Palantir has to think about the right mechanism for which to distribute Foundry to small companies as well as part of a greater stack. And there's one step beyond that. How does Palantir enable its customers to offer their customers Foundry when those customers are the airlines, for instance? He said, were we doing that when those customers are customers? Mentioning that that's just something they're in the thick of right now. And the main takeaway is what he said next, being that he thinks there is a consumer product experience through specific ecosystems that we're putting in. There's kind of a natural conclusion. We're on this journey, we're getting there, we're developing the product as we go, and building value as we go, and continue pushing for the next level. That's along the lines of what he said. So I want to know, how do you feel about that response to the question? Of course, he could not disclose to me any consumer product. He wasn't going to say, yes, we're working on something internally, we're testing it or anything like that. But again, I want to reiterate my thoughts, which is that Foundry and Gotham really have so much farther to go before their growth is maxed out. And I think Palantir should be pushing as hard as they can, firing on all cylinders for those two products before they even start to think about a consumer product. And now we saw the commercialization of Apollo. So so perhaps that will be a third pillar to the growth story. But anyways, there will come a day, and many long-term investors have thought about this, with what sort of B2C product there could be. And while I did not necessarily expect any sort of commentary on that, we did get something that I thought was very insightful from Sham. He said there is a consumer product experience through specific ecosystems that we're putting in. He mentioned Skywise. And I think that's really interesting, that the ecosystems and network effects that Palantir is developing layers their software so much that there is a consumer of their consumer, meaning that you are using Palantir software through an intermediary, which means the scope and scale of Palantir Foundry is drastically increased. So I think it's really important to think about that. In that way, he was saying consumer being someone using Foundry as a consumer of someone else. So I know that's very confusing. It doesn't probably make much sense, but I'm sure that Palantir could pivot when the time comes, when they have enough resources at their disposal to make such a judgment to invest and build out a really everyday consumer kind of product, harnessing their software prowess. So those were the two questions, the final part. I hope you really enjoyed it. It was amazing to be able to ask these questions of Sham. I think both answers were as good as they can get, really. If I ever do get this opportunity again, what would you like me to ask? What questions would you ask if you had the chance? Please let me know in the comments. I want to see all of them. I will write them down. I will take notes. I want to make sure I'm accurately representing everyone here in the community. So please let me know about that. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time.